4:12 a.m. A Kalibr cruise missile, launched from off the coast of Snake Island, slams into the hull of the oil tanker Ukraine F-19, carrying 600,000 barrels of oil worth $42 billion, a critical lifeline for Ukraine's counteroffensive campaign. This wasn't just a tactical strike, it was a declaration of war, a preemptive blow aimed at the logistical heart of the entire southern front. Russia thought they could cripple the supply chain, paralyze the campaign, and retreat into silence. But what followed wasn't a retaliation. It was a precise, firepower-driven surgery, a lesson in speed, data, and force deployed in exactly 30 minutes. This is the untold story of how Ukraine obliterated a strategic Russian outpost in the Black Sea, leaving no chance for resistance. Subscribe and follow as we uncover the battle that completely shifted the balance of the southern seas. What happens when Ukraine decides not to warn but to erase? Let's find out. 4:12 a.m. The oil tanker Ukraine F-19, a steel behemoth over 200 meters long, weighing tens of thousands of tons, carrying 600,000 barrels of crude oil worth $42 billion, was quietly steaming southwest in the Black Sea, more than 300 nautical miles from Odessa's port. Beneath its civilian shell and commercial route, this was no ordinary merchant ship. It was a vital link in Ukraine's southern counteroffensive, where the 6th Armored Group and mechanized brigades needed every liter of fuel to maintain their advance through Kherson. In recent weeks, Kyiv had reactivated a strategic maritime supply route, a logistics corridor connecting Odessa to offshore receiving points, where UAVs, landing craft, and floating bases operated as transfer hubs for fuel, ammunition, and equipment. To conceal their purpose, civilian ships were minimally militarized, fitted with light armor, reduced radar signatures, frequency-hopping communication systems, and escorted at a distance by reconnaissance UAVs and an Ada-class corvette equipped with short-range anti-air missiles. It was a bold plan and a gamble. The ship's route passed dangerously close to Snake Island, which Russia had recaptured just days earlier through a nighttime Special Forces assault. From an abandoned rock, Snake Island had been transformed into a Russian strategic outpost. It hosted a P-18 radar, Tor M2 air defense systems, a Shahid UAV depot, satellite relay stations, and fuel bunkers. Crucially, the island sat right in the middle of Ukraine's supply corridor, a claw jutting into the heart of their logistics line. For Moscow, it was the perfect position to strike without deploying their fleet from port. In internal Russian General Staff reports, this new supply route was marked in red, strategic target disguised as civilian, arguing that Ukraine was transporting NATO weapons, fuel, and equipment on non-flag ships. The Black Sea Fleet Command issued a special directive, used limited measures to disrupt the logistics corridor before the counteroffensive gains momentum. No public statement, no warning, just an order. Op 2, an Aquilo-class submarine deployed off Snake Island, armed with 4 Kalibr cruise missiles. As Ukraine F-19 entered range, the launch order was given. A missile surfaced from the sea, accelerated through radar waves, skimmed the water, and struck the ship's midsection. No one on deck saw anything but a blinding white flash and the shockwave's force. The explosion tore a massive hole, shredding pipelines and triggering a chain reaction with the high-pressure crude oil. A 300-meter fireball erupted, illuminating a corner of the night sea. The escort corvette's air defense system activated too late. 4 sailors died instantly in the engine room. Over 10 were injured, some blown into the sea, while others stumbled through black smoke and flames. No one knew where the missile came from until satellite data confirmed. Its trajectory originated near Snake Island, where Russian radar had gone active minutes before the blast. Kyiv needed no further proof. There was no doubt this wasn't an attack on a ship. It was a deliberate strike on the entire supply chain of the campaign. In a command bunker in Mykolaiv, the Southern Campaign commander didn't convene a meeting. His order was brief: no retaliation on Russian mainland, no crossing international lines. We hit the source of the attack, Snake Island. Within less than 60 minutes, the counter-strike plan was approved, weapons loaded, and targets locked. Snake Island was never a large landmass, but its position forced the entire southwestern Black Sea to redefine how war was waged. Located about 35 kilometers from Odessa's coast, Zemeny was more than a rock in the sea. It was a signal relay spine, a forward radar post, a UAV transit point, and Moscow's unsleeping eye on the water. Since Russia's swift Special Forces landing recaptured it, the island was quickly fortified into a hybrid defensive outpost. A P-18 early warning radar was deployed on the eastern ridge. 2 mid-range Tor M2 air defense systems were positioned on the southern and western slopes, each with enough ammunition for 2 consecutive intercepts. Dug deep into the limestone were communication relay stations, a Shahid UAV coordination center, and depots for munitions and fuel for long-range strikes. An estimated 200 Russian troops were stationed there, mostly coastal defense forces, with some electronic warfare specialists and a UAV coordination platoon. After the attack on Ukraine F-19, Ukraine's high-altitude reconnaissance UAVs began scanning the island for thermal and electromagnetic signatures. The data quickly confirmed initial suspicions. Within 15 minutes of the Kalibr launch, Snake Island emitted multiple military frequency signal bursts. Its radar systems began scanning at an elevated cycle, and surface temperatures around three key areas, radar, relay station, and UAV depot, rose significantly. In other words, after striking, the island was still in combat mode. That made it a legitimate target for a punitive strike. Ukraine's general staff didn't take long to decide. The counterstrike would be limited in scope, lasting no more than 30 minutes. No escalation to Russian mainland, no landing forces, no need to establish a presence post-strike. The sole objective, neutralize Snake Island as a military base. The plan, named Blade, was short, precise, and decisive. The attack was structured in 3 layers. The first was an invisible strike. Decoy UAVs, electromagnetic signal emitters, and jamming aircraft would deploy first to blind radar and force the Tor M2 systems to fire at fake targets. This would clear the path for cruise missiles and overload the intercept systems. The second layer was a penetrating strike. 2 Neptune cruise missiles would target the command center and P-18 radar, while Ram-2 kamikaze UAVs hit the relay station and UAV coordination area, aiming to eliminate all sensors, communications, and command within 10 minutes. The third layer was the kill shot. 3 explosive-laden unmanned boats would approach from the south to strike the pier and coastal logistics depot. Simultaneously, an Ram-2 tactical missile with a bunker-busting warhead would launch from deep inland to destroy the underground fuel and backup communication bunker. In total, within 30 minutes, the island would become a dead zone. No radar, no communications, no supplies, no counterattack. The asymmetric force included Bayraktar TB2 reconnaissance UAVs for guidance and imaging, Ram-2 kamikaze UAVs for small target strikes, Neptune missiles for precision hits on hardened targets, Sea Baby unmanned boats for underwater attacks, and the Ram-2 for the final bunker-penetrating blow. The forces were timed to strike at 2 to 4 minute intervals, ensuring non-overlapping fire phases while maintaining relentless pressure, leaving no time for the enemy to stabilize or organize rescue. This was no longer a vengeful strike, but a tactical annihilation program to the second. Moscow might not see what was coming until every signal from Snake Island went silent, and by then, there'd be nothing left to say. 5:28 a.m. The sky north of Snake Island began showing the first blips of interference on Russian radar screens. They carried no clear navigation signals, no periodic pulses, just silent targets drifting at low altitude, slow speed. But for the technicians operating the Tor M2 air defense systems on the island's western deployment site, those signs were enough. The order came almost instantly. Fire! 2 intercept missiles roared through thin clouds, targeting pre-programmed zigzagging Ukrainian decoy UAVs. Simultaneously, a Su-24 circled at the edge of the island's radar range, releasing a flurry of heat flares while emitting electronic jamming signals at 1.5 seconds intervals, tricking the target discrimination system. In under 3 minutes, both Russian air defense units exhausted their first round of intercept munitions on non-existent targets. And that's when the real strike began. From deep within Ukraine, 2 Neptune P-360 cruise missiles launched in tandem. They flew low, hugging the sea's surface, skimming waves at under 10 meters to evade early detection. As they neared the island, the P-18 radar, already blinded by jamming, failed to lock on. 1 missile struck the command center near the eastern ridge. The other obliterated the satellite communication station. The 2 explosions, 4.7 seconds apart, shrouded the eastern hill in smoke and limestone dust. The command center's roof was blown off. Bodies and equipment were hurled from fortifications. Internal communications went dead. 90 seconds after the second blast, 2 Ram-2 kamikaze UAVs, armed with directional warheads, dove from medium altitude into the UAV depot on the island's south side, where a batch of Shahed 136 drones had arrived 3 days earlier via supply ship. They didn't hit the depot's center, but targeted the junction between the receiving bay and the UAV fuel storage. The first explosion cracked the depot's roof. The second pierced through, detonating near the fuel tanks, collapsing the entire structure inward. A massive secondary explosion spread across a 40-meter radius, destroying storage areas and all unassembled drones. By now, communication between the island's defensive units was completely severed. Surviving units relied on sight and sound to guess the attack's direction. But what came next wasn't from the sky. It came from the water. 3 Sea Baby unmanned boats, each carrying over 300 kg of explosives, had been launched before the attack began. They sped toward the southern pier, used for ammunition and food resupply. and as a temporary dock for patrol boats. At 800 meters, the boat's AI cameras pinpointed 2 container depots and a floating fuel tank. In 15 seconds, all 3 detonated. The first blast shattered the pier's concrete structure. The second sent containers into the sea, creating a vacuum effect that dragged supplies under. The third ignited a massive fire, obliterating the fuel tank being offloaded. A Russian officer near the final blast was swept into the sea instantly. The assault didn't stop. At exactly 5:51, a single streak of light left the ground in Ukraine's Vinnytsia Oblast. It was an RM-2 tactical missile, carrying a 480-kilo dry bunker-busting warhead, programmed to hit an 8-meter-deep underground bunker housing satellite communication equipment and backup power on the island's west side. When it struck, seismic sensors on the opposite side recorded a shockwave exceeding 2.8 on the Richter scale. A blast of dust and pressure erupted through old ventilation shafts, lifting the bunker's roof from within. Most underground power systems, fiber optics, and internal communications vanished in a single pulse. As the smoke cleared, no signals emanated from Snake Island. In under 30 minutes, over 10 primary targets and 20 secondary positions from the command center, radar, relay station, UAV depot to the pier and logistics were completely destroyed. The island was isolated, burned section by section, with continuous plumes of smoke rising. Air defenses were stripped of equipment, communications obliterated, logistics incinerated. No unit on the island could organize a response or counterattack. To Ukrainian commanders, this wasn't an airstrike, it was a perfect military surgery. A 30-minute transformation of an outpost into ash. 6:01 a.m., as smoke still rose from the depots and the acrid smell of burning fuel spread across the sea, 3 Bayraktar TB2 tactical UAVs quietly returned to the skies above Snake Island. They carried no weapons, only the eyes of Ukraine's general staff. What streamed to the control screens in Mykolaiv over the next 3 minutes wasn't a report, it was an indictment. The P-18 radar, once sweeping from the island's peak, was gone, leaving a blackened crater and a twisted metal frame like a giant fish skeleton. Below, the underground command center was a cracked concrete slab, surrounded by equipment scattered in fragments as if crushed from within. The 2 Tor M2 air defense systems, the island's last line of interception, lay motionless amid blast marks, their launch tubes broken, platforms charred, with no signs of reloading or reactivation. On the southern side, the UAV depot, once a hub for receiving and maintaining Shahed drones, was a deep crater, with fires still smoldering under the concrete foundation, and blackened drone frames draped across warped steel beams. The southern pier, the strategic resupply point, had collapsed entirely into the sea, leaving an oil-slicked rocky shore and fractured concrete slabs floating like debris from a sunken city. Around the bunkers, Russian soldiers' bodies lay scattered, most no longer intact. Some lay face down by gun emplacements, others half buried in collapsed entryways. No movement, no medics, no resistance. From above, Snake Island looked like a dismantled machine, every gear broken, every wire cut, no engine humming. The relay stations, backup satellite systems, and underground power bunkers were utterly silent. Preliminary thermal imaging and sensor data confirmed over 150 Russian personnel were killed in under 30 minutes, over 50 injured, and about 20 missing, possibly trapped under collapsed bunkers. All electronic communication and logistical infrastructure was completely disabled, no longer a system. But more striking than the material damage was the absence of any response from Russia's offshore fleet. No landing ships came to reinforce, no UAVs approached the island, no radio signals replied. Everything vanished by the 20th minute of the assault, when the relay station and communication bunker strikes were confirmed successful. No one knew what was happening on the island, and that left Moscow unable to react. Ukraine knew they didn't need to hold Snake Island, retake it, or station troops. The strike wasn't about territorial gain, it was about erasing a firing point from the map. But to send a final message, Kyiv chose a deliberate act. At 7:04 a.m., an 8-man Ukrainian Special Forces team was airdropped onto the island's western shore in under 2 minutes, under UAV cover. They verified the destruction of targets, collected remaining equipment from the coordination station, extracted data from partially burned hard drives, and took 2 items, a Ukrainian flag and a single-frequency transmitter. The flag was planted on the last standing wall of the P-18 radar. The transmitter sent an 8-second encrypted message, enough for every navigation system in the Black Sea to hear. Snake Island is no longer under any combat system's control. After exactly 1 hour, the team withdrew. No trophies, no lingering forces. The victory wasn't in holding the island. It was in proving Ukraine could make a Russian defensive base vanish in 30 minutes, with no one able to stop it. Russia fired a Kalibr at a civilian ship carrying $42 billion in crude oil, and in return, they lost a strategic outpost. a radar base, and a critical UAV hub in the Black Sea. In exactly 30 minutes, Ukraine didn't just respond. They executed a cold, second-by-second military surgery, striking the very position that issued the attack order. No prolongation, no escalation, no Russian counterstrike, just a sequence of silence, each Snake Island target erased from the operational map, one by one, without a word, without orders, without rescue. Snake Island, once called the linchpin of southwestern Black Sea control, is now a blackened rock. No radar, no communications, no logistics, no people. Collapsed bunkers lie silent amid shattered stone, twisted metal like broken bones. The relay stations that once guided Shahed UAVs are now scrap, buried in dust and burned wires. The cost of a mistimed attack isn't in casualties or material value. It's in what Moscow can't publicly admit, that with one wrong order, they lost their most critical offshore stronghold in under an hour. And that, more than any intelligence report or tactical analysis, is the lasting lesson. Not every weapon delivers deterrence. Some strikes, when mistimed, provoke a response no one anticipates. For Ukraine, no speeches or announcements were needed. A flag on a charred rock was enough. And the only statement left after the entire operation, encoded in a brief signal sent from a UAV, became the truest message of this war. We don't need to declare victory. We just need your island to disappear. If you think this story deserves to be known, hit subscribe to stay updated on the next developments from this silent battlefield. Thank you for following to the end. See you in the next battle.